What's happening, gang? You are back live in the Secret Stash, hanging out with my man Joel Incorvaia of Incorvaia & Associates, incorlaw.com. Very blessed, we might even say, to have a man of 36 years of local knowledge of, you might say, also rummaging through the piles of nonsense, Joel, separating the truth from, I guess, the everything else. We'll keep it above board. We'll play the high road and keep it above board and say everything else inside the game of residential real estate transactions that might go a little bit awry. We grabbed 3 themes that we're actually noticing right now, maybe percolating up to the top most frequently. Number one of those, of course, being seller disclosure traps and otherwise pitfalls in selling residential property. You shared a great story right before the break, Joel, and you said you had another one on the docket. So let's start with that.
Yeah, the other story I'd like to talk about is a case we actually tried up in Monterey, and it was one of the longest trials of my career. It ended up going for 5 weeks.
Oof.
And I was representing the seller of about a $3.5 million custom home in Monterey that sat right on a golf course. And my clients are really great people, again, really nice people. But the buyer, both the buyers actually were lawyers. So that probably was the first mistake for my clients selling to lawyers. And it turned out that they were litigious attorneys who would just look for anything they could find wrong with the property. Well, it seemed like it was a brand new home, 3 years old, almost perfect condition, but they had one little problem when the home was being completed, and it had beautiful French doors that faced towards basically the ocean where all the weather came in. And on 2 occasions, those doors leaked during really bad rainstorms. So as a result, my client brought their contractor in, and the contractor adjusted the doors, and they believed that it had been fixed. They had no further problems. Well, they sell the house, and of course, about a month after the buyers move in, Monterey had some really bad weather, and the doors began to leak again. This led to a very thorough investigation by the buyer of all kinds of other problems with the home, and by the end of the day, with their $3 million home, they thought they had about $1 million worth of damages, and they sued, of course, the contractor built the home, the real estate broker, and the sellers. The real estate broker ended up settling for almost $500,000, believe it or not. But my clients didn't believe they did anything wrong. We took the case to trial, and after a 5-week trial, the court found that there was no liability. But had my clients been advised by the real estate agent to maybe do a little bit more thorough job in terms of their disclosures, this problem probably never would have occurred. Again, you don't often think about these type of things because the leaks had occurred 2 or 3 years earlier, but I think their real estate agent, maybe that's why they paid $500,000 to settle, probably could have done a better job of sitting down with them and saying, let's make sure that we've covered every potential issue or problem we ever had in the home, because even the most minor issue might end up blowing up in your face later.
Well, man, and it's such a telling tale, too, because there's a thought amongst probably most brokers, even if they won't admit it, and then I would definitely say almost all of the sellers, that you don't want to make mountains out of molehills.
Right.
And so there's like a thought like, oh, well, we just won't tell them about that, and they think it's very minor. And I don't know, the course over my career, I can tell you, I've never had a deal blow up because of something that a seller had disclosed. And maybe we're lucky about that. Maybe there's other deals where they realize, oh my God, this is terrible. I couldn't imagine this happen. Okay, I'm out of here. But if you think about the economy of scale between the two concepts, right? Like under disclosing or then getting in trouble for under disclosing, would you not agree that in 10 times from Tuesday, the concept is disclose?
I would probably over disclose. I've owned my house for 26 years, and I'll probably be selling it in 5 or 6 years when I get closer to retirement because it's a big house. But I'm already thinking about making a list of all the things that have ever gone wrong with this home over 25 years to make sure that whoever buys it knows everything, because I just don't think you can disclose too much.
Yeah.
Because even the little minor things can come back to bite you. Like in this case, going through this California Association of Realtors seller property questionnaire, my clients forgot to check a box saying that they had a pest control service coming out to the house every month just to look for mice or eradicate pests. And then, of course, after the buyers moved in, the first thing they claimed is that they had a mouse infestation. And it didn't lead to a significant amount of money in terms of damages, but they were saying, look, if you lied about the mice, you lied about having the pest control service, then maybe you lied about the French doors and other issues as well. So some of these questions they ask are very detailed, and you really have to go through them and think about them and take your time. And I would recommend, if you're selling property, that when you put it on the market, that you start going back and looking at your history at that house, every insurance claim, every flood, every little plumbing issue, everything you've ever had come up, and make a list so that you don't forget to put it on the form when it comes time to actually have a buyer in the door.
I love that thought, Joel. And I'm actually thinking right now of a couple things like stopgaps that I can install into my process to make sure that I'm protecting not only myself, of course, but the chief operating principle there being my seller.
Right.
Maybe even doing the clue report in advance and making sure that there's nothing that they forgot about whether it was under their watch, because that can happen sometimes too, right?
Exactly.
And that's a good question too. So what about the concept of like negligence versus just like, hey man, like honest mistake? Like, so is there any like backseas button that a seller can do in that situation if they're just honestly forgot and they didn't think it was a big deal?
Well, if you don't remember, I mean, you forgot, you're not liable. You're only liable for not disclosing things of which you're aware. But what often happens is
where's
the seller
that line drawn in the sand, though?
Well, it's very difficult to know where that line is drawn. But oftentimes what happens is you had a problem and you didn't think it was big enough to disclose. It wasn't significant enough to remember.
So you did remember it, but you just thought, oh, your omission, right?
Like my clients with the French doors. I mean, they didn't put in the disclosure statement that they'd had a couple leaks, but they thought, well, that happened 3 or 4 years ago, and it was fixed. We haven't had a problem since then.
Yeah.
So in their mind, they had disclosed.
Yeah.
But going back, I mean, after 4 years of litigation, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to bring a case like that to trial, believe me, they regretted that they hadn't put it in the disclosure statement.
Yeah, well, no question, I would bet. But so, like, what happens if you just forget?
Well, I mean, obviously nobody has a perfect memory,
right.
But the problem is when the buyer has a problem, he's going to say, well, you didn't forget. I mean, this is too significant for you to forget. How could you not remember this?
Right.
So now it's he said, she said. I mean, it's very hard for a judge or jury to know what you were thinking at the time you filled this thing out.
Yeah.
But they look at the circumstantial evidence. If it was a significant problem, most likely they're going to say no. You should have known. You should have disclosed.
Makes sense
and we don't
to me.
believe that you just forgot about it.
This could be triggering a question for you. And if that's the case, I welcome you. There's 2 opportunities to get in touch with us here in studio. You can either call in at 866-405-1717, or you can tweet your question live by going over to our Twitter handle at Follow the Stash. We're actually streaming this whole broadcast live right now. Joel, let's switch gears a little bit. So let's say you're the buyer, okay? Now, the buyer is, of course, advised by their real estate agent, once they get into contract, to immediately perform a home inspection, right? Correct. And that's supposed to be your savior. Like, that's your big acid test. You know, you're paying the guy for, $350 to maybe $500, depending on the size of the home, or up, to give you an honest opinion about whether this is a lemon, and then more specifically, what are the things wrong that we could never possibly had imagined when we were just walking through before making an offer, to be able to go back and potentially even negotiate a repair request with the seller. What are some challenges, though, that you got to watch out for as a buyer when hiring a home inspector?
Well, first of all, the home inspector is probably only going to be out at the property for maybe 1 to 2 hours. So it's very difficult to do a thorough inspection in such a short period of time. Another problem I've seen is that this business of being a property inspector usually involves getting referrals from real estate agents to get clients in the door. Very rarely does a buyer go out and find their own inspector. They're going to rely on a real estate agent. And therefore, the property inspectors, particularly working with the buyer's agents, are looking to them for referrals. Well, let's say that property inspector goes out and he finds all kinds of major problems with the property that the buyer's interested in purchasing. If he just has a huge list of problems, the buyer may back out of the deal.
Right.
The real estate agent may lose his or her commission.
Right.
So I think oftentimes there's almost like a business incentive not to see every particular specific major problem that's out there. And this is what I've seen in many, many cases. I can't say this happens all the time or every case, but I've seen it often enough to be concerned about it, is that the inspector goes out there, he finds every door that doesn't close properly, every lock that's broken, every window hinge that needs to be fixed or something like that, and there's a giant crack in the slab, and which is causing the house to settle, and somehow they miss that. Or there's evidence of a roof leak or something like that, and they miss that. So there's all these little repairs that they want the seller to make to close escrow, but the buyer then closes and finds out he's got a big crack in the slab or something else that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix. And I've seen many cases where these things were never caught by the property inspector. The other thing is these guys only get about $200 to $500 for their inspection. If you look at their contract, they normally say that even if I'm negligent, even if I didn't do my job right, my liability is limited to what you paid me.
The $200 to $500.
Yeah,
right.
And you have a $100,000 problem.
Right.
So I consider that to be a concern. If I was buying a property today, I would probably bring in a contractor, a licensed general contractor, to look at it, and maybe pay a little bit more, but have somebody do a very thorough inspection. Because in San Diego County, the average home is over $400,000, $500,000.
Right.
In the area I live in, everything's over $1 million. If you're paying that kind of money for a home, you want to make sure that you have looked for every potential problem that you might see.
Yeah, and I love that thought. And what I would add is to say, is to almost prescribe to do both. Like most people, when they're thinking about, like approaching a house in due diligence phase, they're just thinking about the home inspection.
Right.
Right. But if the home inspector is worth their sand, and by the way, if you want our list of folks around the county that we think do good work, corroborated by third-party sites, you're more than welcome to go to our website and shoot me an email over at thegreenhousegroupinc.com. I'll share with you, we've been through the rest to get to who we think is the best, but they operate as general practitioners. Right? Just like your family doctor. Like they go through, they're checking things that a contractor isn't probably going to spend too much time on, like the heater, is it functioning, and is it cycling correctly, and is it blowing out the correct air in the AC and the, with their little thermal scan. Like there's gaps that they're going to be able to accomplish that a contractor never is. But if they notice anything that's even slightly wrong with the property, they'll tell you, if they're good, you got to go get a specialist for this. You got to go get, to your point, a foundation expert. You got to go get a roofing contractor. So you got to think about the fact that it's not just a one bullet in the gun. Like they're going to find stuff and they're going to refer out to have extra people. And I think the main challenge is most people have got it in that they want to do a home inspection, but then they stop to think, oh, you got to do follow-up inspections with all the people that they recommend inside that 42-page document.
Exactly. But you have to get to the point in your report as a home inspector saying, I see something here that warrants further investigation.
Right.
And as I said, I know you're a very honest real estate broker. You want to make sure that the contractors and the inspectors you work with have integrity and are thorough, but there are real estate agents out there that just want to get the deal closed. They want to get their commission. This property's been listed for a long time, or I've been working with this buyer for a long time. So oftentimes they don't want to bring other people in because they might find that there's a problem. So I think that they're very good at oftentimes listing the little things, making sure the heater works, the air conditioning works, the appliances work, but sometimes there's signs of bigger problems, and somehow they seem to miss them. I've seen it over and over again.
Could not agree with you more, my friend, and that's part of the reason why we got to make sure that you've always got good counsel on your side. Now, Joel, I know that most people think about getting a lawyer involved when things go wrong, but man, there's so many things that you could also imagine of you guys playing a critical role, even in the due diligence process. Something as simple as looking over the seller disclosures with somebody who can, with a trained eye, tell you and spot for potential red flags before you actually go all the way through the process, become the owner, and then have a problem in retrospect, which of course is more difficult, more challenging, more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. Would you not agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At least have your real estate agent go through the document with you in detail, and if you can afford to bring a lawyer in, frankly, somebody could come to my office and in an hour we could go through all this and we could probably really help them. But I'd say probably 1/10 to 1% of buyers will actually do that. Maybe in a multi-million-dollar property, of course, they'll put more effort into that due diligence process. Yeah. But for a lot of buyers, they don't really think about it. It's just like, I got 14 days to take a look. Oh, no problem. I don't see anything that looks too bad with the house. I'm in love with this house. Right. And they have an emotional attachment now to the house. They really want to close. So oftentimes even the buyers don't want to see the problems. It's only when they move in and they go, oh, now this, the toilet's backing up, or now I've got some leaks in the roof I didn't know anything about.
And that's why we got my man Joel Incorvaia in the house. Joel, we're going to pick this up right where we left off. So coming up, the one other final thing that you got to make sure you're watching out for as a buyer in the process of picking up some real estate right now in San Diego County. So, Steve, we're going to get them all caught up on some Sports Minute stuff. I think we're going to Boomer Esiason talking about some cool women's hoop stuff. And then after that, we'll be back. Real Talk Radio San Diego, you in the stash.